Well, as the visit took place in the US, I think it's logical and rational to request Jeff to give his perspective on the outcome of the visit. What are the main takeaways? What are the issues on which more discussion is needed? And so let us hear Jeff Sexton, who is acting DCM of the US Embassy. You can speak from your place here.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. It's a great pleasure to be back here again, and especially with such distinguished panelists, and I appreciate this opportunity. From our perspective, the visit went extremely well. Just to echo Ambassador Kumar's assessment. There were, first of all, I think in meetings like this, the personal rapport makes a big difference, and there was a very good rapport between the Prime Minister and the President. They had over 5 hours of meetings. They did their press statements in the Rose Garden. As far as we can tell, that was the first time since 2005 that's been done. President Trump hosted his first White House dinner for a foreign leader for Prime Minister Modi, and all of his closest advisors were there, and family. And I think that, symbolically means a lot. From our perspective, focusing on what we think as the highlights of the meeting, and these were outlined at greater length in the statement. First of all, I think there's clarified our priorities in a partnership that has been growing closer over the years. The 4 areas I would outline in particular are combating terrorist threats, promoting stability across the Indo-Pacific region, increasing fair, free, and reciprocal trade, and strengthening energy linkages. Embracing the term Indo-Pacific region is actually quite significant from our perspective, because it underscores the administration's recognition that the Indian Ocean has a very strategic role to play in the broader Asia-Pacific. And it reaffirmed common principles, common understandings about the need for freedom of navigation and freedom of overflight. I'd also note that it called for transparent infrastructure development and responsible debt financing practices. That's kind of diplomatic talk for the One Belt, One Road initiative. I think it's very clear that the United States continues in the affirmations that we have made in the past about our desire to see India become a leading security provider in the Indian Ocean. One of the things that will be underlying that and be kicking off on Monday will be the Malabar exercise, and I believe this will be the largest that we have had. That's the India, US, and Japan naval exercise off of Chennai. And we would like to do a lot more together. I think from the United States perspective, we would like to increase this kind of interoperability training. Another very significant issue, and this is not new, nonetheless it was underlined, was our designation of India as a major defense partner. And this has real consequences, and it did at this particular summit. The United States has agreed to offer to India our state-of-the-art Guardian unmanned aerial surveillance platform, a drone. This is something that we have in the past only given to our alliance partners, and when I'm speaking of NATO, and countries that we have formal defense alliances with. Another thing that was emphasized is that our sort of joint interests in the Middle East and our desire to combine your Think West approach with our Act East cooperation in Asia. And this is an area we would like to expand consultations, and I think we have a lot of overlapping interests in the Middle East. Focus for us, obviously, right now is on North Korea. And we feel that India has implemented UN Security Council sanctions on the DPRK in April. And we are anxious to get India's cooperation on further actions. One of the more significant things, I think, was a strong language on terrorism and the evolution of what I think is a healthy counterterrorism partnership and possibility for greater capacity building and tangible action, including intelligence sharing and operational level cooperation, cross-screening of data, sharing of data. We also designated the Hizbul Mujahideen leader and are consulting with India on other designations. Part of our interest in this summit, of course, focused on trade and economics. We're very anxious to expand that relationship. As Ambassador Kumar mentioned, the current level is about $114 billion a year. I think the potential for two countries like ours is much, much bigger. That is something we feel very strongly about on this side, and we think there are many areas where we can expand trade. We want to grow the relationship. And among the export opportunities that we see are in energy. They were underlined the fact, I believe, that something like $30 billion in LNG exports are destined, that contracts have been signed for that. And I believe, and I know there are people in this audience who know even more about this, that something like $10 billion have been invested in the United States by Indian companies on liquefied natural gas, processing and terminals. Another thing that was announced at the summit was that Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, would lead the delegation for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, which will be held here in India in the fall. And this has been a very successful series of things. The last one was held in Silicon Valley last year. A huge number of the people who attended were from India. You know, given the fact that something like 15% of the startups in Silicon Valley are started by Indians, entrepreneurs, that was very natural. And it shows the kind of potential that our two countries share in this area. And then finally, I want to talk about the strategic energy partnership. That's probably not something that I think in the past it's had a high profile in certain dimensions, for instance, in nuclear energy. But this LNG announcement, I mean, this was in the works. It was not something that was done for the summit, but I think it underlines that this is an area that there's huge potential for economic growth between India and the United States. The United States is now, after many, many years of legally not being able to export gas and oil, we are now doing that. And I think, as you're all aware, production in the United States is very robust in this area now with the shale oil revolution. And then finally, we're looking for ways to simplify, people-to-people exchanges. We continue to, the relationship is good in many, many ways. There were 1 million Indians who visited the United States last year. We're trying to simplify the process for people to come to the United States, and we've announced that India has become part of our so-called global entry process now. That just was announced, and will begin to so that we can simplify and increase people-to-people ties. So in several areas, the summit, in its broader outlines, the summit affirmed a strategic direction that has really been going on for 3 administrations now. But there were particular emphasis on things like counterterrorism, cooperation on security, and the energy and economic field that I think new emphasis is on, and I think will be hugely helpful to the development of economic relations and cooperation between the two countries.
Thank you, Jeff.